Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our first official Learn with Lunch or Lunch with Learn, whatever you might like. It's really quite exciting for us because it's the first one we're doing um, ever. But it's the reason we're doing it is so that we can actually connect more with our community. So one of my co-directors is on. Hi, Bobby. Good to see you.
Hi,
Our other
Linda.
co-director, Robin Hewith, can't be with us today, but the good news is she'll be with us next time round because she's going to have a special guest that she's going to talk with in September. Now, welcome. I know we've got a number of people on. Some of you may know about GTPD and some of you may not know about GTPD. Boy, put my teeth in, it'll be good. But I just want to welcome you. GTPD stands for Global Training and Professional Development. And it was a company that Bobby, Robin, and myself started about 3 years ago now, I think, a little over. And the reason we did it was to give back to the dispute resolution community, particularly our mediators and family dispute resolution practitioners. So that was the aim, because we've been in the business quite a long time. Bobby, not quite as long as Robin and I, but we have a few years under our belt. And what we do is we offer all your CPD needs like memberships. You get a membership and you get to watch live and recorded webinars on a vast range of topics because every year we look at what's new, what's current, what's exciting. We also have masterclasses, which I think is one of our really big sellers in terms of that we actually cater to our community. We've got a couple left for the year, and that is basically we have property, I think, coming up in October, and we have evaluative mediation, which we ran for the first time last year and was very successful because we know that we're looking at that. The other thing I think, for those of you who don't know us, is that we are a member of the Mediator Standards Board. We are a training organisation under the Mediator Standards Board, so we all offer NEMAS training. And that is something we're also very proud of in terms that you have to jump through a few hoops to get accepted that way, and we did, which was wonderful. And so we're offering that. I think we've got one coming up over 6 days. We spread it out between September and October. And so if you're interested or you know people that may be interested, please let us know because we really would like to help. But today is really exciting because it's our first Learn with Lunch. We can't give you lunch, but we can give you a little bit of learning. And we hope we can in that way. Now, we decided we'd ask people that we respect, that are icons in the industry, that have, I'm going to say, been around for a long time, but that's really mean, but have had a lot of influence. And so we've got a number of people coming from international, coming from both legal, social science sectors. So do watch the space and our LinkedIn and such like to actually see who we're having, because I think that's something that we really want to give back to the community, is connect in with the people that have, I'm not saying been groundbreaking or been around a long time, but certainly have been someone that's been influential. So I don't know if you know us. Bobby Riley's been a mediator quite a long time from the community sector, but now has got a private business and does mainly family, but also workplace. Bobby and I have worked together and we've done board mediations, not being bored, but working with boards in that way. Some of you may know me. I may know some of you from training. I've been around quite a long time as well, specialised in training, but have done mediation and still do mediation. But the person I'd really like to introduce today, and we've got about an hour to chat, and we would welcome your questions along the way when you're here. And some of you may want to ask questions of Mieke without notice from different things, but we'll just see what that comes. I'd like to introduce both my colleague and my good friend, Mieke Brandon. Now, Mieke is one of the leaders in our community, in terms of she's prolific in not only practice, but also thinking and being reflective in practice. And that's proven in the number of articles she's written. And for those of you who are FDRPs, if you don't have mediating with families, where have you been? Because it's the book, as I always say, it takes you from student to practitioner and back again. But also Mieke has done workplace. Mieke probably, hopefully won't mind me saying, she always talks about herself being post-career, but now in terms of she's trying to ease out, but we keep dragging her back in, and she offers wonderful mentoring. She still writes articles, and she still looks at looks at different things and what really needs to happen. And that's why I wanted Mieke to be probably our first guest, not only because she's a good friend, but she has been focusing on something very exciting for the last couple of years, which is starting to take traction. And some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not have heard of it. And so today's discussion will be a little bit about that. So welcome, Mieke. Lovely to see you again. It hasn't been that long, and we will be seeing each other very shortly, won't we, across the ditch? Can you hear me, Mieke?
Hi, yeah, I can. Hello, thank you for the introduction. I can hear you, although every now and then it echoes when you talk, so I don't know what the problem is. But thank you very much for inviting me. I had no idea that I was the first kid on the block to do this, so I better behave.
No pressure. And I'm sorry about the echo, so hopefully you will still be able to hear me all right. So Mieke, I invited you to come on with Learn with Lunch today to talk about relationship mediation. Are you able just to give our attendees, and we have a number of them on, can you give in your own, what do you define relationship mediation as being?
Right. Well, relationship mediation is really the purpose of relationship mediation, in the way I look at it, is to help people, well, according to the Family Law Act, FDRPs have to sort of explore whether the person who comes for their first intake because they've been dumped by their partner, to really work out whether, they really want this separation. So that is in Australia now a practice that has originated, in Australia, and we call it here relationship mediation because originally it comes from the United States as marital mediation. But because more people get married 3 or 4 or 5 times in America, we don't seem to have that in Australia. So when I started with introducing relationship mediation, I have contact with the Americans, but I thought for us, it may be better to call it relationship mediation. And it's not only recommended by the Family Law Act, it could also be for couples who want to enrich their relationship. And we've had quite a few people trained already in this. Linda and I have run master classes, haven't we, Linda, for AMA and the Resolution Institute. And I think we're probably around 75 people, 80 people that we have trained.
And we're hoping that we can run it. Sorry, Mieke, and we're hoping we can run it for GPD as well, to be involved, to run a masterclass if we get the interest from our members. So that's why partly we're here today as well. But can I ask you, what made you, what triggered your interest in what was in relationship mediation? Why did it come to your attention?
Marital mediation in America. Yeah, well, I've been a member of ACR in America for years because my son lives in America, and I used to get the dispute resolution quarterly. And so I read all the articles by the people who introduced marital mediation in America. And then I found out that my son and his former wife actually had marital mediation every year. And what they did, the purpose was because, in relationship, people have togetherness and they have autonomy. And when you have different interests, obviously you need to negotiate how much autonomy you're going to have, how much we time you're going to have. And how much me time you're going to have and how much family time. So I call it we, me, and family time needs to often be negotiated, particularly when you have children. So that's how I got interested in it. And so I read all those articles again, and it just came from a gut feeling, really, Linda, didn't it?
Yeah. So,
and then I started writing my own articles, one of them, to shape it into our country and in New Zealand. Yes.
And with relationship mediation, it is predominantly for the family sector, but are there some elements of relationship mediation that general practitioners, general mediators could use in other kind of relationship? Have you seen that kind of crossover in your research?
Yeah, it's a good question, Linda, because a lot of counsellors actually like relationship mediation because it's respectful, it is solution focused, it is goal orientated, and it's not the traditional therapy, family therapy of the counsellor where you go to all the problems that you had as a child that you're still trying to repair yourself, because you cannot change the past. Okay. And so relationship mediation accepts that you can't change the past. Also, that the longer you talk about your problem, the problem exists. And these are words from Frederick Benning, who was a colleague of mine from the Netherlands, who wrote a book about positive supervision and solution-focused mediation. And so I have embraced that in this whole relationship mediation program, because the purpose is for couples, partners, to start with their strengths. What are the strengths that they can bring to their relationship? And from there, if you saw them for intake, you almost coach them to say, what do you think is your strength that you bring into the relationship, and what do you think your partner's strengths are? How motivated are you to come to relationship mediation, and how motivated do you think your partner is to come? Because if you don't do that, then they haven't got a clue what it actually is. So you need to be transparent about that. The sessions start with an individual intake process. You might have a handout or an article that you send to them or give to them to debunk what it actually is, because people are quite happy to read an article and then think, yeah, that might help us, that might really help us. And so, but you also have to make sure that it is safe, psychologically and physically safe for them, obviously, to come to relationship mediation. Do you want me to go through the intake process?
Well, in a minute I will. I just will ask you a little bit about, you've touched on the difference between counselling and relationship mediation, which is a much more positive solution focused. What would you see, if there's any, and how would you define the differences between relationship mediation and those of us who do FDR after separation? What's different between RM and FDR post-separation mediation? Is there anything obviously different there?
In terms of the process, one way to process, if you do mediation in the workplace, or mediation with neighbors, for instance, or mediation for people who are separating, the process is very, very similar, because remember the iceberg, that you have to deal with what the issues are for mediation. However, in relationship mediation, it's not about the issues. As I said, it's about the strength that they bring. It is facilitated. You help the partners to talk with each other, not to each other, with each other, so that they can express their hopes and goals, and that the hopes and goals are actually part of the agenda, right? So it's not the issues of what doesn't work, it is the issues that may have worked before that have been a bit neglected. So how can they retrieve what worked in the relationship before, and how can they focus on their hopes and goals and the we, me, and family time? That also means that we tend to avoid a private session, because what you want to really do, either if couples want to enrich their relationship, or whether there's as a result of someone rang someone up or texted them, I want a divorce, to create new trust. You know, and I don't know what your experience is, but again and again and again, when I did 30 years of family mediation, many people text or phone their partner and say, I want a divorce. And of course, the shock horror, and then you get all the emotions that you might be familiar with, as fear. Can you know, do you have to move your home? Do you get enough money to set up a home again? Will you ever get to see your children again? And so then there's a lot of fear when someone says, I want a divorce. People have also said, you know, you keep your daughter and I'll keep the son. Those sort of things. And so there is a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of unknown things, which you have in workplace mediation as well. Because in workplace mediation, you also have to keep a relationship unless you resign, right? And as neighbors, you know, you want to be able that they don't park their car in your drive, or they knock over your rubbish bin and you have to pick it up every week. So you have to establish a relationship somehow, because you don't have to like each other, you just have to be respectful.
And that's what I'm thinking, is that relationship mediation, whilst it finds its grounding in family, and it also has application, its skills, process, and the slight mindset change to any ongoing relationship that has to be there. And as you indicated, workplace, neighborhood. So rather than be dispute resolving, it can be a positive solution focused type mediation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And don't forget, you know, the iceberg and the satisfaction triangle that you use in every mediation, hopefully. And if people aren't familiar with it, you know, you can do a webinar on that. But it is so important that the substance in a mediation is addressed, that the process is addressed, and the future relationship. Because when you're parents, whether you stay together or whether you are separating or you're no longer living under the same roof, one is living in the retirement section of where the elderly parents work, for instance, and people do that, you know, or one lives upstairs and one lives downstairs. You're going to be parents for life, and people, you know, you can't have two 18th birthday or two 21st birthdays or two, you know, weddings or engagement parties or two funerals, can you? So it's really
we just have a
important.
comment that I might from one of our attendees, is relationship mediation equaling solutions that enrich FDR, which equals outcomes that parties find tolerable. So I think that, you know, and I think that's the point too. Thank you for your comment. That's the point too. I think that whilst we're talking about enriching and making relationships, you know, looking at the relationships going forward, me, you, me, you time, me time, family time. It also can be worked, and I find this, that if I had probably a knowledge of relationship mediation, when people are thinking about separating and being able to do that in a respectful way, we're being able to be on the same page and tell the same story, is such a powerful tool going forward, because we know from experience that's often in FDR, that's the problem. They tell the different story to the children, or they have a different view of the story. Whereas I think, and maybe I'm wrong, Mieke, but relationship mediation could also be a very good process to use for that purpose, when people needing to be on the same page.
Absolutely, because in relationship mediation, one tends to, well, certainly coach them in intake, but also because you've got both in the room, you can coach them. You can give them handouts. You can refer them also to counselling, because there's nothing wrong with family therapy or counselling, and it could be a balance for both of them to see an independent counsellor or to go to family therapy as also that can help them. The other thing is that we don't really go for agreements, we go for understanding. And often if the session of about 2 hours is probably more than one session, because of the homework that they may be motivated to do, and you give them resources to do it, and then they come back and having done the first steps, for instance, to say hello to each other when they come home, or to negotiate between me and family time. Like I know people who have date nights, for instance, because the parent had date nights, and then the children get looked after so that the parents can have a date night together. A lot of and so you can write it up as a template of what, rather than an agreement, John and Mary agree, you can say John and Mary, or Mary and John, have an understanding that they're going to use listening skills with each other, and to really peel the onion. Rather than saying why, and why are you doing that, and why do you have that perspective, it's say, tell me a little bit more. What is the need that you have? What is the interest that you have in more sex, or more date nights, or more movies so we can hold hands? You really get to the bottom of the interests, because separation is not the only option. You could use a sheet of paper where you probably, look at all the options. You could go on holidays.
Yeah.
You could on holidays. You could go to more places where, you can walk the dog together. You don't have to do that by yourself. Or where you could have dinner. My husband took me on magical mystery tours. So I took him on magical mystery tours, and it had nothing to do with money. It had to do with the innovation of a picnic, a ferry ride, something that was new and different. Right?
And there's so much there. There's a really good question that from one of our participants that I'd like to discuss with you. Is there then some conflict when you bring relationship mediation in an FDR, as we're not supposed to offer solutions? But in RM, you're not offering solutions either, are you?
No, you don't offer solutions. And the thing is, you in a way, if you've got an FDR session and a client for FDR, you can say, have you thought about it? Separation or divorce might not be the only option.
But in RM, in relationship mediation, from my understanding and my involvement in it, it's very facilitative. It's not about us saying you should go and kiss your husband every morning or kiss your spouse every day. It's about what do you both need to do. So in some ways, it's very much more facilitative, and very less that our interventions are much more facilitative and question based and what ifs and homework
and handouts, reading, and and the only thing that you could do, if people feel stuck or at an impasse, which you would do in a normal mediation as well, you try to obviously focus on the common ground for their future. And you also try to focus that what if someone, all of a sudden was rude or slammed the door or came home late again, do you really have to, react? Do you have to blame, shame, and complain? Yes, it's an option. We all do it every now and then.
But I suppose
flight, fear, or what is it? Freeze or please. There are all sort of metaphors that you can use, but then also you can say, well, would you like to know how other people have dealt with this? And then you make it up. So you don't give advice, but you make it up.
Well, that's that fine line that people do that in mediation, in FDR and mediation. Do you want to hear what other people in your circumstances do? That's a discussion for another time, because I don't believe in that. I think that's a slippery slope. But that's a discussion for a
slope. But it often helps, even in property settlement and estate and elder mediation and all of that. It really helps, because often what other people do. And as long as you give 3 examples, and then you can also say that you don't have to take any notice, but, this is what other people, after 30 years of being a mediator and an author and a researcher, my God, I can give you hundreds of examples. And so can Linda, of the tough mediations we did, say at Relationships Australia, about religions and all of that, and then getting to what all those different religions, what they have in common, for instance.
But the bottom line, Mieke, you would say that relationship mediation is even more facilitative in its approach.
Yeah, and it reframes. If that didn't work, what would work?
And you touched upon something I think we can get into a little bit about the differences. Whereas a lot of our colleagues who are on may actually, spend all day doing an FDR or a mediation. In relationship mediation, is very much chunking it down to 2-hour blocks and done over a period of weeks, isn't it? And the reasoning behind that?
Well, the reason about that, because it's new, and it's you have to be careful that there are quite a lot of people who find changing very difficult, because they're so used to either black and white thinking, they're so used to do it exactly like their parents have showed them, and that might not have been constructive. And Australia is one of the largest multicultural countries, and so there are very many different cultures that have traditions and ceremonies and all of that. And think about when you go home for Christmas to your parents and you see your brothers and sisters, often that ends up just like 20 years ago, doesn't it? And that's why we also use in relationship mediation genograms or family map. So because the family can have a huge influence on your relationship. If your mother-in-law comes and visits, and she is actually borderline rude, or tells you that you're bringing your children up the wrong way, whether you're dad or mum, doesn't matter, do you want to be parented by your mother-in-law? No.
And that's what I was going to say. The genograms, for those of you who use genograms, for those of you who don't use genograms, that relationship mediation, I would think, would be where genograms would really be in their fall, because it's not only for the mediator, but I would think showing the couple or showing the people involved the dynamic of the relationship and the influences, because I think, and I'm talking about, marriages and partnership, domestic partnerships, that sometimes they don't realize the outside influences that are actually impinging on them as a couple. And I think a genogram gives them that whole picture about the focus. And I think in terms of some I know I've seen and done is mum and dad's relationship with the children, if they're that strong, and then their own relationship has got lost in the shuffle. I think it's very powerful myself, and being an old lawyer who went genograms, what the heck they are, I think they're terribly important. And I think for people in ongoing relationships of any description to know what their map looks like gives them a sense of what's happening for them, what's external, what's internal. Sorry,
No, that's really nice explained, Linda, because if you did a workplace mediation, you would need to know the structure of the business or the organization. Who's the CEO, who's the manager, at what stage in a dispute in the workplace would they have to do an assessment, right? Are you coming in as a mediator before or after that has been done? Have they bullied or have they not bullied? Have they, been disrespectful? Have they been, using equipment that another people only has a right to equipment? Because it is very different. Because as Linda also saying, in families, people take sides. In places people take sides, and so because mediation, whether it's workplace or neighborhood or FDR or anything, relationship mediation is confidential. And so Linda mentioned the one story one that also say, for instance, people after even 2 hours decide to continue with separation. What I find really interesting, that one of the authors in America said, well, the first thing is say if Linda and I were separating, the first thing they say, Mieke, try to talk Linda out of it. Right? Which I love, so I will use all my charm to talk Linda out of separating our relationship. Right? And then Linda might say, oh gosh, you're very convincing, or get stopped, I don't want to hear it, and go like this. But I love it that you could almost try to convince someone by using all your techniques and your charm or your needs, so that either to make Linda feel guilty or say, no, I want to get rid of that woman. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and look, and that leads me on to a little bit about talking about, and when there's no PowerPoints, we're not going through, but I think just to clarify that the sessions, the actual relationship mediations are approximately 2 hours in length, and everybody's in there, mum and dad or parties, whatever, participants, whatever you want to call them, they're in there for the whole 2 hours. There's no private session. However, you do the intake separately, don't you?
Absolutely, you do.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit? Is the intake is very similar to what? I can't hear you. The intake would be very similar to what we do. What is any differences? Yeah. Any differences you think should be highlighted in the intake?
Well, that you might want to use motivational questions, and that you have to put yourself into the shoes of the other person to see a little bit about what you think their hopes and goals are, and certainly their motivation to come. And it's very interesting because, as we all know, some men find it really hard to go to counselling or therapy. Yeah. And Linda and I both studied family therapy. Remember those days, Linda?
Remember those days?
Those days. You know, that really the mediation that is future focused and goal orientated is for some people much easier because they don't want to touchy-feely stuff. Yes. And that could be women as well, because there are women who have black and white thinking as well. You know, the moment people start using should or you shouldn't, what are you doing? You're giving directives based on your own values and beliefs.
And it would be correct of me to say that prior to the intake, even there's always a safety assessment that you're never, you know, that we, you know, so this, and I think you called it a safe environment. So you're not going to have RM for people who it isn't safe for, that you're going to do that risk assessment. So that's sort of even before you do the intake to see if there's that risk assessment. So just to allay the fears of any of our colleagues who are listening, this is not something you throw everybody into the deep end with, but you always do a risk assessment. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they also have to have the competencies and the patience and the willingness to learn to be respectful and not be so reactive. Because there's some people that are very reactive, and if they hear someone in a certain tone of voice or using a certain expression or language, that they go straight away, well, you know, don't you dare talk to me at all. You always, you never. But you probably said it at home yourself.
Yeah.
And so that blaming and shaming and complaining is actually normal. Every family has disputes. Every couple, the Gottman Institute, which is very handy for handouts, you know, say people, families and couples complain about everything and nothing, you know, because that is the easiest way to go. And so we have to be very, very careful that some people have to do 180 degrees or 360 degrees changing. And so all our change language, all our rapport building, all our careful listening, all our acknowledgement, all our positive questioning, reframing, this needs to be used. Does that make sense?
Very much so. And
yeah,
I suppose that's the difference with the intake, that it is already getting them looking positive. It's about, you know, as you say, it's not about their issues. It's not about it's about their goals, expectations. It's about what's motivating them. It's about getting to see what's motivating the other party, or the participant. So there's a slightly different mindset shift in what you're looking for. Can I ask you about one of your favorite interventions, which is scaling questions, in terms of, you know, how important, but in terms of how that really does have this use of scaling questions, which we all should have in our repertoire. But I see that as a really positive and a really interesting way of, you know, getting the parties to talk with each other about, in relationship mediation, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, Mildred, you know, what do you like about, you know, how much me time you think it's important? Well, I think 5. And Fred, well, I think it's only 2. And I think scaling questions, but I know you're very good at explaining that. So I'm going to handball you scaling questions to talk with our audience about.
Thank you. I think you explained it okay. Well, I have learned the scaling. I'd like the 1 to 5 that you mentioned before, but it's usually on a 0 to 10. And I've used it in every family dispute resolution mediation halfway into FDR or workplace mediation, because you want to minimize complaints. And so if you ask a scaling question in relationship mediation, you will do it when both the partners are in the room, because they want to hear each other. You can say, how is this going for you? could you scale, give it a number between 0 and 10? In FDR, you might do it in private session. But if Mildred, I think you called her, says 3, then you can say, well, if you left in 3/4 of an hour and you wanted to score it a 4, what would need to be happening for you? And then they might say, well, I remember someone saying, I want the mother of my children to come back from New Zealand. And I said, that is really wishful thinking, isn't it? Ask the mother, whether you can come to New Zealand or whether she can take the children back to New Zealand. So your role is as a dad, and I never say ex-partner, because we often deal with people that are parents and their role is parenting. Their role is caring for their children. And, some people find that very hard post-separation or when they're rebuilding the relationship again, because they've neglected it in a way. So scaling questions and motivational questions are hugely important in any type of mediation, and particularly in relationship mediation, because then they can use it themselves.
I would think
cooking and she makes something that she's never made before, but it's the lovely dinner for dad, then she can say on a scale of 0 to 10, how well did I do doing this spaghetti bolognese or something?
And I would imagine that scaling questions are very much the way you could link one session to another in terms of
Absolutely.
the RM. So, coming back after having homework, and I'll touch upon homework in a minute, but I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, I would think that would be one of my opening questions. So on a scale of 0 to 5 or 0 to 10, how do you think the last 2 weeks went in terms of reconnection or whatever you're phrasing? Fred says, well, I think it was a 7, and Mildred says it was a 2. Then I think that's a really good opening. That's a safe opening to say, okay, we're on a little bit of a different scale. Mildred, would you like to explain to Fred why you gave it a 2, what and how it might turn into a 3 or 4 before we finish? So I think scaling questions are a nice, safe way.
What would you have preferred for you to score it, higher? Because often, if you wanted to win the Olympic Games in swimming or whatever, you're training. And if you all of a sudden go to relationship mediation after, 15 years taking each other for granted because you had to bring up your children and you had to work to pay the mortgage and all of that, or look after your car, or repaint the house, or redo the garden or something, you've concentrated so much to survive as a family, and all of a sudden, you're both 50 or something and you have no more children at home. So at any age you could do relationship mediation.
Well, I was going to touch on that a bit later, but I would see relationship mediation having a impact along the way of a relationship. For those, I'm thinking, not only the empty nesters, which I think, when you get to 50 and you go, oh, hello. Oh, no children. What do we have in common? But also, I think with society the way it is, we've got people that are struggling to fall pregnant, and I think that often puts a strain on the relationship.
Absolutely.
And I think RM could be really helpful for people, rather than even counselling, is to get their expectations, their goals, and how that fits. But certainly when people are so busy, and I mean, you have that lovely little diagram that you use where you have 2 people in the canoe paddling different directions. and I think that's I say you've got to work out if they're in the canoe first, but if they're in the canoe and paddling different directions, RM is really appropriate to actually see if they can get, somebody turn around and stroke together, or whether or not it's time for both of us to get out of the canoe, which isn't a bad thing, but to do it in a respectful way, and really looking at it from a solution focused. And you do talk about it being a solution focused type of, not an agreement, as you say, it's an understanding, but there's solutions to what they bring to the table. Either we're going to stay together.
But you can put it in a template.
Yeah.
And and particularly in wills in the States, to rebuild a relationship is vitally important. So you use some of these techniques for people to also respect that the family doesn't die with the death of the grandparents.
Yeah.
You know, and so anyway, and I don't know, I've noticed sometimes, you know, if someone has two shopping things in Coles or Woolies, and I've got 2 bags full, I let people go first. And what I've noticed since I've moved here in New South Wales, people are stunned that I do that. But it comes just naturally.
It was your Queensland upbringing for so many years, Mieke.
my mateship and my generosity. But you know, and I don't, and it just happened last week again. You know, people were waiting to get some cash, and they have machines now to give cash. I've never seen them in Queensland. I've seen them here in New South Wales all the time. You know, coins come out of one machine, and you know, paper cash comes out of another machine. God, I'm really learning a lot of things.
You're learning a lot. Yes. One other thing, if I can talk about the process of RM, I would think it's one of those processes that you may have to have, you know, you would have a 2-hour session following the diamond, following our diamond, the top and bottom triangle, but then probably have another session in a couple of weeks, another session. But it's the kind of one you probably could have, and this is just me off the top of my head today thinking about it, it's that ideal top-up. You know what I mean? You could have intensive for a couple of 3 or 4 sessions, and then say, we'll see you in 6 months or see you in 3 months, to give them that kind of, you know, as much as we do reviews and trial periods when we're talking about post-separation and to do with children, I would see RM having its place intensively for a finite period and then kind of top-ups as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Because, you know, to change your style of communication and behavior, and to really take your obligations to your children to be a role model. Because if you ask a lot of people in dispute, what was the role model you got from your parents when they argued? Well, you start asking that and you'll be gobsmacked, absolutely gobsmacked. So if we want to have more peaceful, because we're peace builders, aren't we, as mediators, more peaceful relationship and more respectful in relationship in the future, parents need to become serious role models. You know, because, you know, it's really interesting, but also I think that when you do a template and you've dealt more with hopes than with goals, then you can say in the template, you know, Bill and Mary have dealt well with an understanding of their hopes, and next time they might want to focus more on goals.
Yes.
Or more on verbal communication and different behavior to create a team. Because the moment you've created a team, and you know, we've seen all the soccer games and the Matildas and everybody else, you work as a team in a relationship.
Why do you think RM, relationship mediation, would be a good addition to someone's practice as an FDRP or a mediator?
Well, from what I've heard from those who have adopted it in their thing, it's very beneficial, because often they feel more that they've achieved more with the clients, right? Because it's and it is beneficial also for the children. You know, it benefits the children and it benefits the mediator to be able to balance their practice between all the different types of mediations that they could be doing.
And yeah, and I personally think, and I don't know if anybody's on from our crew, from the participants on, that, you know, community-based organisations, FRCs, this is a logical add-on to their work they do, because they see the participants there, the, you know, mums and dads and partners, and oh, you're freezing. I wonder if I'm freezing. Are you back? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, back now. Yeah, thanks.
I was just saying that I think for places like Catholic Care and Relationships Australia, that this would be another part of their repertoire, which they deal with so many areas. But for private practitioners, and Mieke, you may correct me, and I'm happy to be, because it's all good, that I think having an understanding of relationship mediation, we touched upon it, would be beneficial if you're in workplace, if you're doing elder, if you're doing wills and estates, if you're doing neighbourhood. Maybe you're not going to do it fully, but having a knowledge of kind of the structure and the skills and what you're trying to achieve would be really helpful. Because I think in the cases of like neighbourhood disputes and workplace, having an understanding of the philosophy of RM, because they have to actually continue with the relationship. You know, there. Oh, hello, Martin. Good to see you. Sorry, I'm just waving to someone that's on. But so you need to actually, I think about what RM can do to enhance your practice, even if you're not an FDRP. Because if you're working where people have to have an ongoing relationship, whilst you can solve the problem of whatever the dispute is, RM looks at future goals, expectations, how to really improve that as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, because, you know, I call mediation skills actually life skills. And so it benefits your own relationships.
Yeah.
You know, and it benefits, you know, your children. It benefits your whole family from the multi-generational genogram, or a family map, whatever you want to call it. And I've written an article how to use genogram strategically. So it is also very creative to give yourself a challenge and do some different things, rather than seeing the steps or the process or the triangles as a recipe, right? Yeah. Because it creates new insights into your own practice as a mediator. And Linda knows that when we were first working in Relationships Australia, she would say to me, "Oh my God, you take all these different cases on." And I said, "Yeah, why not?" And my first relationship mediation was with these two gay guys who had a dispute about their finances, and the counsellor said, "I don't know anything about finances. Can you see them?" And I did. Yeah, that's where I got the metaphor of the canoe from, because it worked for them. You know,
and I suppose you're touching upon what
their finances.
Yeah, and you're touching upon what's so important is that, and that was 30 years ago that we started working together, Mieke. We just
I know. See,
anyway, that's beside. Yeah, I know. Yeah, but seriously, I think, you know, what's termed as a relationship has changed over the time. You know, the assumption that it's just a mum and a dad needs to be, you know, we have two mums and a dad. We have two mums. We have two dads. We have, you know, we have a village that raises a family from cultural. And so being able to enhance the relationships
Yeah.
is so important because, a couple of questions and answers.
Blended families, and the research says that often the children are very spoiling the blended family because they want their own parents at home.
Exactly.
You know, and whilst the Scandinavian people look at it you know, special parents and bonus parents and bonus children, I don't think we have embraced that in Australia yet.
No.
You know, but there are really bonus parents and bonus children, and then you can treat them as bonus parents and children. None of those stories that we had when we were children about step parents, stepfathers and mothers. And
that's so something negative. That's something you go into a lot of detail. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just that we've got two questions. How exciting. How do you manage communication with the parties in between sessions? Are the boundaries established around that? So I would imagine, go ahead, you answer that. So,
well, it depends on what you do, whether you use an agreement to mediate that some people use as a service agreement in counselling, or whether you have an open practice where you don't mind being rang up. But when you're rang up with one parent, and I did that with any mediation, I would say, before you start telling me things, I will have to tell the other person that you've rang me, right? I'm not going to keep secrets. I might not say what it is about, but I will say that they've rang me.
And I can imagine too, Mieke, and correct me if I'm wrong, another option is that you will say, next week I will give you a call on Tuesday, Fred, and I will give you a call, Wilma, on Wednesday, just to check in how you're going, because it is a very different to when we do mediation. So I think depending on the people that you have, you may want to set up a different kind of structure depending on what's going on.
Absolutely, and your creativity within the codes of conduct of being a facilitated mediator is very important. And I just want to remember, Linda, also that in intake, if someone sees a psychiatrist because they have borderline personality disorder or something, it's really important, what we used to do at Relationships Australia, you know, to make sure that the psychiatrist is comfortable with you also going to mediation. Could you ask him or her for a letter? I will give you information to give to your psychiatrist so he or she knows what mediation is all about. The safety in the mental and physical area is number one.
Yeah, exactly. Last question, because we've only got a couple of minutes. That's gone quickly, our lunch. We didn't get lunch. We just did the learning. If you previously had done relationship mediation, would it be appropriate to do the FDR if the relationship doesn't work? So,
$1 million question. It really depends on whether you feel comfortable doing it, because at least people know why they're going to separate, and how they can do that with the one story to their children and family and friends, because mediation is, it's $1 million question. If you feel comfortable doing it, and if they feel comfortable doing it, just go for it. If you think, no, I think they would do much better with an independent person, refer them. It's a matter of choice.
It really is. And the last comment was from Elena, who said she'd be very interested if we offered a masterclass through GPD. So I may ask Mieke very nicely if she'd like to join with me and we offer a masterclass at some point for our GPD members.
Absolutely. Because Linda and I are passionate about it, and why not run more masterclasses for people who are interested.
But anyway, we're nearly through. I want to say thank you for giving up your lunch. next time in Sydney, I'll shout your lunch. But look, I think what we want to do is that this is first off the rank, and we're going to be offering things like that bring new things to your attention, things that are happening out there. Bobby's just put up, we have these are the dates for our NEMAS training.
And you can ask them for feedback. You can ask them.
Yeah, we will. We will always ask for feedback. We will.
Let me know.
And then we do have September with Sala. Sala's, well, I think we can claim our international mediator. Sala's based in Hong Kong, and she is a researcher. She's a writer. She's covers lots of areas. So that's going to be September. We have our master classes, as you say. Thank you, Bobby. We offer our memberships. We offer templates, and so we've got that. And our new products, which luckily you don't have to see my face, but you see the lovely Bobby's face. We've done packs for intake demonstration, where you get a intake demonstrated with a critique plus material and plus a family matter mediation for all those people who say, particularly the young practitioners who like to see that. And again, Bobby does the mediation. It is something you need popcorn with, because it is a 3-hour video recording, but you get critique from the wonderful Robin Huworth, and you also get material. There's our contact details. Otherwise, you can reach out if you know us individually. More than happy to partake there. But can I just thank you, Mieke, so much indeed. For those of you who are not clapping, I hope you are, to give us your time. And I thank, Leonie raised her hand. That was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for our first Learn with Lunch, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. Thank you all. Bye all. Just stop recording.